If you take a look at the economic map of North America right now, you are looking at a crime scene. As of December 2025, the United States isn't just losing money. It is hemorrhaging $2.7 billion every single day in halted trade. We are witnessing the single fastest decoupling of two major economies in human history, and the scale of the damage is almost impossible to comprehend without looking at the raw data. In the last 10 months alone, the U.S. tourism industry has lost $12.5 billion, a staggering collapse driven almost entirely by one demographic: Canadians. Border crossings are down 33%. Hotel bookings in Montana and North Dakota have evaporated. But the most terrifying statistic for the White House isn't on a government spreadsheet, it's in the grocery aisles. A recent Angus Reid poll confirmed that 98% of the entire Canadian population is now actively checking labels to boycott American products. This isn't a protest, this is an economic siege. So how did a 25% tariff on steel turn into a $700 billion nightmare? And why are military analysts warning that this trade war has effectively killed the concept of North American security? To understand the gravity of this collapse, we have to go back to the day the longest undefended border became a wall, February 1st, 2025. To really grasp the magnitude of this crisis, you have to understand that the US-Canada border is not just a line on a map. It is the busiest commercial artery on Earth. Before this conflict, $2.7 billion worth of goods crossed this line every 24 hours. That is more than the US trades with the United Kingdom, Japan, and Germany combined. When President Trump signed executive order imposing a blanket 25% tariff on all Canadian goods, he didn't just tax a competitor. He effectively detonated a bomb in the center of the US manufacturing sector. The logic from the White House was America first, a strategy to force Canada to clamp down on the northern border, which the administration claimed was a fentanyl superhighway. But the Canadian response was not submission. It was what economists are now calling asymmetric economic warfare. On February 4th, Ottawa didn't just fire back. They aimed for the jugular. They implemented a retaliatory tariff package specifically designed to target the electoral geography of the Republican Party. They placed a 25% tax on bourbon to cripple Kentucky, the home of the Senate minority leader. They targeted dairy to crush Wisconsin. They went after corn and soy to suffocate the Midwest. The strategy was ruthless: make the president's own voters pay for his policy. And it worked. By March, agricultural exports from the US to Canada had dropped by 40%. But the real black swan event, the thing nobody predicted, was the psychological break in the Canadian consumer. In the modern world, economic nationalism usually fails because people want cheap goods, but Canada broke the model. Within weeks of the tariffs, apps like MapleScan and Skanada shot to the top of the App Store. These apps allowed 12 million households to scan barcodes and instantly reject anything made in USA. We aren't talking about a few angry people on Twitter. We are talking about a 98% participation rate. This is a level of societal mobilization usually seen only during total war. The result? US alcohol brands have been virtually wiped off Canadian shelves. The elasticity of demand, a term economists use to measure how much buying habits change when prices go up, snapped. Canadians proved that their demand for American goods was highly elastic. When the price went up, they didn't just buy less, they stopped buying entirely. The damage is most visible in the border states. Montana, a state that relies on Canadian tourists for massive chunks of its revenue, is in freefall. One hotelier in Kalispell reported a $38,000 monthly loss solely because Albertans stopped driving south. Multiply that across thousands of businesses from Washington state to Maine, and you have an entire northern economic belt that is currently on life support. The U.S. Travel Association forecasts that if this trend continues through 2026, the total loss to the U.S. economy could exceed $70 billion. But the most dangerous consequence isn't about money. It's about metal. The United States relies on Canada for roughly 50% of its aluminum and a massive percentage of its steel. These are the raw materials for everything from Ford F-150s to F-35 fighter jets. By taxing these imports, the U.S. made its own manufacturing base uncompetitive overnight. A car part often crosses the border 6 or 7 times during assembly, with a 25% tariff hitting it every single time. The cost of manufacturing in North America has skyrocketed. Major U.S. automakers are already idling plants in Michigan because they cannot afford the steel to keep them running. This trade war has revealed a terrifying geographic reality. The United States is not an island. It is part of a continental organism. By trying to amputate Canada, the U.S. has inadvertently severed its own supply lines. And we haven't even talked about the nuclear option yet. Energy. Canada supplies 60% of US crude oil imports. The entire US Midwest refinery system is chemically engineered to process heavy Canadian crude. They cannot simply switch to Texas light sweet crude. The pipes and refineries literally won't handle it. If Canada were to retaliate by restricting energy flows, a move that Premier Danielle Smith of Alberta has explicitly threatened, gas prices in the US Midwest would double overnight. The lights would literally go out in parts of New England that rely on Hydro-Quebec for electricity. As we head into 2026, the question is no longer who will win. The data is clear. Nobody is winning. The US GDP is projected to shrink by 0.5% this year, solely due to these tariffs. Nearly 500,000 American jobs are at risk, and Canada is rapidly pivoting its entire economy toward Europe and Asia, building a future where it no longer needs the United States. We are witnessing the end of the special relationship. The longest undefended border in the world is still there, but the trust that kept it open is gone. And once supply chains move, they rarely come back. The US just forced its biggest customer to shop elsewhere, and looking at the empty shelves and canceled orders, it looks like they aren't coming back. This trade war has exposed just how fragile the North American continent really is. Donald Trump has just branded Canada as a national security threat. He has decided to burn down the bridge to his closest neighbor. He is doing it with a recklessness that should terrify anyone who cares about the future of this country. For the first time in our history, the President of the United States has looked at Canada and seen a hostile entity. Think about that for a second. We are not North Korea. We are not Iran. We are Canada. We fight alongside America. We build with them. We buy more from them than China, Japan, and the UK combined. Yet, since returning to the White House in January 2025, Trump has treated our alliance not as a partnership, but as a protection racket. The directive is clear: submit or pay the price. This isn't just political theater or a standard trade spat. It is the implosion of an alliance we took for granted. We are now months into a manufactured crisis where the United States is threatening 25% tariffs on Canadian goods, a move that has already put auto manufacturing plants in Michigan on hold and slashed lumber shipments to homebuilders in Arizona. But perhaps most insultingly for many of us, this manufactured crisis has left the tourism revenue from Canadian snowbirds in Florida completely in the lurch. The message from Washington is clear. They are willing to unravel the North American economic zone and inflict pain on American families just to prove a point over grievances that simply do not exist in reality. Donald Trump seemed to believe from the get-go that Canada would just roll over like a terrified junior partner, but this time, he isn't dealing with a standard politician. He is dealing with Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of England and Bank of Canada, who effectively shut down Trump's bullying attempts not with a scream, but with a cold, hard look at reality. While Trump engaged in theatrics and Twitter wars, Carney focused on the data and the integrated supply chains, refusing to engage in insults because he understands the global financial plumbing better than perhaps anyone alive. The rhetoric coming from the White House has been truly unhinged. Reports from late October 2025 revealed that Trump labeled Carney's refusal to tear up existing agreements as nasty and went as far as to say that Canada was behaving like a threat to US national security. Can you believe the nerve of calling us a national security threat? The same designation given to North Korea and Iran, when we are a country that fights alongside the US, builds with them, and buys more from them than China, Japan, and the UK combined. Trump made sure to air these grievances publicly on Truth Social and cable news, blasting Canadian leadership for supposedly taking advantage of the United States, sending shockwaves through the business community. This betrayal follows a pattern we have seen time and time again from Donald Trump, whose loyalty really only extends to himself. We saw him turn on Jeff Sessions, his first senatorial endorser. We saw him humiliate William Barr for refusing to seize voting machines. And we saw him send a mob after Mike Pence, a man who served him loyally for 4 years, simply for choosing the Constitution over Trump's ego. Now Canada is in the hot seat, and we are learning that you can show all the loyalty in the world, but the moment you refuse to be an accomplice to his economic delusions, you become the enemy. The impasse happened because Trump's team wanted unilateral concessions on USMCA enforcement, effectively demanding the right to reimpose tariffs whenever they felt like it, while the Canadians were trying to maintain the rules-based order that businesses rely on. Ultimately, the breakdown happened because no one was willing to budge on the basic concept that a contract is a contract. As the talks dragged into November, auto parts prices started spiking, small businesses in border states began panicking, and the stock market started to wobble because investors hate uncertainty. While Canadians stood steadfast, the American public began to shift their blame toward the chaos coming from the White House, with polls indicating frustration with the rising cost of goods. This was the moment Trump began to sweat, as he values his image as a master dealmaker and certainly doesn't want to be tied to a recession caused by his own unforced errors. That is when Carney made a move that Trump viewed as a serious misstep, but was actually a necessary act of sovereignty. Carney started looking for ways to diversify Canada's trade, opening discussions with other Pacific nations and signaling a willingness to look at Europe more closely. When Trump caught wind of this, he absolutely lost it, because in his eyes, diversifying is just a sign of weakness and betrayal. He believes that any ally who dares to protect their own interests instead of serving America's is instantly labeled a traitor. This has left our leadership in a tight spot because the Canadian economy is heavily dependent on cross-border trade, and the business community in Toronto and Montreal knows that losing access to the US market would be catastrophic. However, we also have a duty to protect our national sovereignty, which means figuring out how to stand up to a bully and ensuring we aren't just a vassal state. Canada is caught in a bind. If we keep trying to please Trump, we accept humiliating tariffs that paint our leadership as weak. But if we do our job as a sovereign nation and diversify, Trump turns against us with the full force of the US government. It is a tough situation, but it is causing major stress within the American conservative movement as well, because moderate Republicans know that a trade war with Canada is unwinnable and suicide for the US economy. Even prominent strategists like Steve Schmidt have broken their silence to call Trump's behavior toward Canada reckless, immoral, and stupid. But there is a twist in this story that is vital for every Canadian to understand, because the resistance is also rising within the United States legal system. On November 5, 2025, a coalition of business groups filed a lawsuit in federal court stating that Trump's use of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to impose these tariffs was a massive legal violation. They pointed out that the Constitution is crystal clear that the power to tax belongs to Congress, not the president. The legal experts didn't hold back, with the consensus among constitutional scholars being that Trump's actions were constitutionally indefensible and an abuse of power. George Conway, a conservative legal voice, sounded the alarm by stating that if these tariffs are allowed to stand, we are effectively erasing the separation of powers and handing the president the power of a king over the economy. Even Supreme Court Justice Gorsuch warned about a one-way ratchet of executive power during oral arguments, signaling that the courts are skeptical of this massive overreach. The implications of this showdown reach far beyond just the US and Canada. It is about whether the United States can just abuse its power whenever the president feels like it, which could totally change how the global economy operates. Mark Carney has been working hard to keep the global trading system from collapsing into protectionist blocks, but Trump has waded right into a war on the very concept of free trade. If Trump is allowed to declare a national emergency to put a tax on Canadian maple syrup, what is to stop the next leader from doing the same for political retribution against a domestic industry? Democracy relies on norms and institutions, assuming that people in power will play by the rules even when it is inconvenient. But when those norms crumble, democracy itself starts to falter. As we look ahead, the political fallout is already hurting Trump, with his approval ratings taking a hit in key swing states like Michigan and Wisconsin, as farmers and manufacturers get anxious about the upcoming midterms. Democrats are planning to argue that Trump believes he is above the economic laws of gravity and does not hold the well-being of American workers in high regard, using the rising price tags at Home Depot as Exhibit A. So here's the deal. Donald Trump has pushed our closest ally to the brink, but for the first time, he is meeting a resistance he couldn't bully his way through. This isn't just about trade deficits. It is about whether we want to live in a world governed by the rule of law or the whims of one man. If the Supreme Court allows this to stand, we are stepping into a completely new realm where the president is an economic dictator. We are staring down a historic challenge, and while the economic pain may be coming, the evidence is stronger than ever that we must stand firm. Because the alternative, surrendering our dignity and sovereignty, is something Canada simply cannot afford. If you found this video valuable, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for in-depth analysis and grounded perspectives you won't find in mainstream coverage. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.